With the arrival of October comes the time of year where artists gather to follow a prompt list for 30 days straight. There's quite a few of these things, which creates a nice variety for artists to pick from. Last year, I participated in Cringe-Tober, for example. I would have done that again if I hadn't come up with a much more self-indulgent video idea. What if OC-Tober, but if it was just all of my OC-AUs? To explain that a little bit, a fun fact about me is that I have so many alternate universe concepts for this group of 7 silly guys that you see here. I've spent many an hour lying in bed, imagining not only these story ideas, but also the new character designs I would make for them to boot. Since OC-Tober is one of the more flexible prompt lists out there, I decided to be a little silly and make my own. So that is what I've done. I've put together this little prompt list of 15 AUs that I will base my designs, redesigns, reinterpretations on. Because I have other projects I'm working on, this list is half the size, with 15 prompts. Rest assured though, I've picked the 15 AUs that are going to be both the most fun to draw and the most fun to talk about. That's all you really need to know for right now, so let's jump into... For these prompts, you're going to see these two stinkers, Ash and Balab, the most. These two are my webcomic OCs, and right now they're just being drawn in their usual outfits. I'm going to introduce you to both of them right now, and we'll talk about the rest of my OCs on day 2. The circumstances of my OCs are going to change from AU to AU, so it's going to be the most efficient to talk about the core aspects of them that exist as a common thread across these various scenarios. Frequently a lone wolf type, Baleb tends to have some sort of exceptional skill related to the setting, only matched by her stiffness in social situations. She's blunt and a quick thinker, with a strong sense of justice to boot, which frequently gets her into trouble. She takes a long time to warm up to people, but if you prove that you'll stick by her despite everything, she'll expose a dry humor, a secret awkward nerdiness, and a fierce loyalty. Ash in classic tropey fashion is her polar opposite in many ways. Ash is quite friendly and can hold a conversation quite well. He tends to cling too tightly to relationships due to an inner need to have security in his life. This can lead him to hold on to people who just want to use him, unfortunately. This is balanced out by his earnest and curious demeanor. He's also just a sweet little guy who is a great listener, idealist, very hope-core coded. Are you ready for 5 more of those spiels? No? Well, too bad. Here we get the full collection of all 7 OCs. The other 5 are technically a part of my comic's main canon, but we're just not at the point of the story where they show up yet. These designs are the ones I consider to be the default ones. Ash and Baleb have different fits here since I want to specifically differentiate that these are their adult counterparts. Or that they have adult counterparts at all. I find for basically all of my AUs, it's more realistic to make them more in the young adult range. But anyway, let's get to some more character intros. Sophie is the first one here, which is fitting since she tends to be the heart of the group. Sophie has a very strong emotional intelligence, acquired either through magical means or just really good intuition. Sophie uses this to be the mom-therapist friend of the group. Due to this, she can make the mistake of presuming that she knows more about people's emotional state than they do themselves. Above all else, Sophie means well, though. She's terribly distressed by the idea that something she did could hurt the people she cares for. She's also my one OC, who's usually defined as the one with no trauma or baggage. Novel concept, I know. Kahali is next if we're going by the rainbow order I've arranged here. Kahali presents himself as an energetic, fun-loving guy who is quick with a joke and an easygoing smile. He's the first person to hype someone up when they're down on themselves and will pick you up out of your slump if he has to. While that side of him is not entirely fake per se, it would also be a mistake to presume there's nothing else to see. Underneath this amicable fellow is a passionate core who is dedicated to using a persona to protect himself and others from the hard things in life. This can lead to him struggling with vulnerability, feeling that maintaining the mask is the most useful tool he has. Arenda falls right after him. Arenda is a person who tends to be doing all the things. She keeps herself busy not only with work or school, but also her many hobbies, clubs, and relationships. However, she stretches herself thin with all of the commitments, and that is intentional on her part. Oranda dislikes sitting down and thinking about the dark, deeper topics out there, so she distracts herself from them. She can come across as shallow as a result, but if she reorders her priorities, she can surprise you. Isis is consistently the most goal-oriented out of the whole cast. Her usual passion of choice is sustainable fashion design, but for our sake, it can be whatever's needed for the AU. Isis feels like she has something to prove to her peers. The people around her growing up presumed that she wouldn't make a whole lot out of her life. As a result, she presents an aloof, eccentric persona to other people as a way to be taken seriously. Deep down, though, she's a lovable dork and just needs some acceptance for her to unmask a bit. Phoenix is the last person on our tour who happens to have the opposite problem to Isis, which is fitting since they often have a history together. Phoenix is naturally very smart with an uncanny ability to pick up on very subtle details about an environment, for example. There's so much potential for Phoenix to be a great asset to the team as a result, but is unfortunately allergic to the spotlight. Phoenix presents a very relaxed, understated kind of personality in hopes that no one expects anything out of them, believing that no matter what, it would always end in failure. Breaking that self-perception is key. Whew, thank you for sticking with me on that. I promise I won't talk for nearly as long on a single day. It would just feel wrong of me to give you absolutely zero context on these characters before I start talking about major divergences in canon. After day 2, I figured it would be good for the first AU to be something that people might actually be familiar with. In my previous video, I made a short visual novel based on this AU of my OCs. If you haven't seen that video, all you really need to know is that the story takes place in a beach town with a rumored supernatural history, which is true. The rumors are true. I thought it would be fun to incorporate Isis's main passion into at least one of these drawings, so I paired her up with one of the OCs that's not quite human in this story. Said non-human is a ghostly Sophie, who I imagine is thrilled that someone has taken an interest in the era she lived in. I also picked these two because I like their designs. Sophie's white silhouette thing is always fun to draw, and Isis has this cute retro vibe with her swimsuit that in the final visual novel didn't get to be shown off fully. That being said, I do regret not doing a thumbnail sketch for this one. Would have made the composition and perspective much better. This is my crossover special. Specifically, this is a crossover with another webcomic idea I have called Icarus. Icarus is a superhero/magical girl story that takes place on a floating city. This is a sci-fi fantasy story, heavy on the sci-fi, lighter on the fantasy, where the main characters try to use their magical abilities for good, even though it's outlawed. Fun fact, I was originally going to make this story my first webcomic, but I backed out, realizing that I was just too inexperienced to handle a story with complex world-building, characters, and plot. Shelving the idea was not in vain though, because time away from it has allowed me to come up with better ideas for it. Ash and Bolab are back, representing 2 of the currently 4 races that I have for my story. I wanted their fashion choices to contrast each other as well. Ash is leaning into the more typical fashion for this high-tech city. He is sleek in silhouette and his outfit is dominated by a bright color. This would match the look of the city itself. Bolab instead wears black, which contrasts the city, which is mostly white or pastel in color. She also has some fabric here that is more flowy, while still keeping a more futuristic edge to it. I am shocked at how well the coloring turned out for these, especially for Ash. I was worried that my current style really needs black outlines specifically in order for fully colored characters to work, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The monochromatic looks for both of them look very nice. I'm pleased. This AU is one of many that came from a dream. All I remember about said dream was Bolab entering a pirate ship and encountering a mermaid Ash. When I made that visual novel a month ago, I had the idea to make another one in a point-and-click style format that takes place in this AU. I still brainworm about it sometimes. I imagine that game would involve the player both using items and your party members' unique skills to solve puzzles, but for now, the idea only exists in my head as I have so many other things to do. As for the drawing itself, I think it turned out pretty cute. I like the smooth gradient I put on Ash's skin to make him look more fish-like. That's probably my favorite detail. I based his design off of the... Oh, I forgot to write down what I referenced. Let me get back to you on that. So looking back at my sketches, it looks like I based Ash off of the Green Phantom Pleco. So there you go. Also, I'm glad I added a background color blob for this one. I think it ties everything together nicely. Oh boy, I get to pull out an idea that I almost drew for Cringe-Tober. I think this Beauty and the Beast AU came to me in a dream as well, and I've had some fun thinking logistically how to make it work for Ash and Bolab specifically. When imagining the story in my head, I really wanted to lean more into the Beast being a tragic figure, someone who was never given a chance to be seen as a person. and I guess in the end, not being able to be one at all. I end up coming up with all of this extra backstory to explain how Balab became cursed, involving this whole lore with the Enchantress that could be its own story, honestly. I feel like this is another concept that would work in visual novel form. I imagine you could play as Ash and walk around the castle, talk to servants, and come across documents to piece together this history the kingdom has forgotten. It's a more somber interpretation of the classic story, for sure. I thought that making a platonic Beauty and the Beast story instead of a romantic one would be hard, but no, you actually just have to add a couple of extra things and it works fine. The highlight of the artwork is Balab's monstrous form, which I decided to lean hard into being pretty spooky. I feel like some of my sketches of her capture the specific vibe I was going for better, but hey, what can you do? This AU wins the award for the most unconventional medium I would use to tell it. This AU is my proposed idea for a scripted Minecraft SMP. I'm very serious right now. Specifically, this story is built around the only Minecraft mod console edition me has ever wanted for many years, which is the Dragon Mounts mod. It adds dragons to ride in Minecraft. It's old, but what more could you want? For this AU, I'm including the dragon types from the OG Dragon Mounts and the one from its sequel. I grouped all of those types into 7 distinct factions, one for each of my main characters. This is oddly enough one of my more fleshed out ideas. I think it's because I'm basically writing Minecraft fanfic and because I came up with a strong theme early on. Anyway, we got 3 people to talk about here. We have Ash from the Earth faction, Phoenix from the Death faction. These names aren't super concrete. And Balab from the Ender faction. I imagine in practice these designs would work like how the Empire SMP did it, where armor each player has is like a custom armor set, even though they're all like diamond armor or something. I incidentally made my brush smaller for this piece, which ended up being quite fun to sketch. It's the closest I've gotten in feel to sketching on paper with mechanical pencil, which is something I used to do a lot, so that's high praise from me. I find that it's been really hard to recreate that feeling digitally. The thin line work also, I think, helped with drawing some of these different textures to the point where I may have gone overboard with them in a few places. You thought I was done with this Minecraft AU, huh? No, I had to include everyone for this affair. You may immediately notice that these outfits are different in vibe to the 3 that we have just done. That is because we are drawing ceremonial outfits this time instead of like normal adventuring clothes, I don't know. So basically 6 out of 7 of my characters in this AU are apprentices for each faction's Dragon Master. Basically the people who are the head administrator for any dragon-related affairs for their faction. These outfits are the ones they wear for a lot of special occasions, but the one that I have in mind is initiation ceremonies. This is basically when the factions gather every kid who's like 13-ish and test to see how much magical potential they have to bond with a dragon. It's kind of like spirit animals. Do any of you remember spirit animals? I vaguely remember spirit animals. I'm imagining that the specific initiation involves eating a particular food depending on the dragon type and standing in a particular lingering potion because haha, lingering potions require dragon's breath. I'm very smart. That is also not how the mod works, by the way. I'm just imagining how essentially a big Minecraft server would pass out dragons if there was a hypothetical magical means to see if you can bond with them. Side note, there's actually some really interesting theories as to how Minecraft's magic system works, but you don't really need to know any of that. I just think it's neat. For the outfits themselves, oh my gosh, I'm actually very, very happy with them. They all feel very distinct from each other, and as such, I'm going to give each one a little appreciation. For Sophie's, I thought that only using the very basic snowflake shape for her embroidery would look silly maybe, but they end up also looking like stars, which is fitting for the dragon type she represents. Isis has some face paint to mirror the distinct markings on the Aether dragons, which I love. Gotta rep my favorite dragon type. For Renda's, the shape of the dress is what I'm particularly pleased with. It's definitely a moment of concept in head translating well to paper. And lastly with the Kahali, I had a lot of fun getting inspiration from fancy men's fashion in India. You guys have drip over there, men over here need to step it up, for real. Maybe my favorite AU drawing so far? I think this one sets a good standard for what I should be aiming for on future days. I thought of this story idea on a whim one day, but ended up expanding the concept a lot more than I thought I would, based on the initial premise. That premise being that Kahali and Balab are summer camp counselors who get lost with 4 of their kids and accidentally activate a hidden portal to a fantasy world. They also discover that in this setting, every fantasy race has its own form of magic unique to them. However, humans are not natural to this world, and so when a human finds themselves within this dimension, they awaken to a power that is completely random. This obviously gets them into trouble as their powers are rare, and the kids especially are prone to be taken in by the seemingly whimsical and friendly land. For this one, I decided to opt out of drawing Balab, even though she's technically a code lead in this one, in favor of drawing one of the kids, since the 4 of them are a large part of this AU's identity. This girl is the main one in my head. This was my first time drawing her, and I ended up getting really attached to her very quickly. She has this adorable weird girl energy to her that I find super endearing. I don't have a name for her yet though, so I gotta think on that. You also probably spot that I've drawn a fairy Sophie who's representing the 5 other OCs who are some sort of fantasy race in this setting. I thought it'd be fun for her to be all colorful to make her contrast with the more grounded humans. Honestly, I think her design and the way she's colored is my favorite part of this drawing actually. It's very pleasing to the eye. This one is a step back from complexity from the previous day, but I still think it's cute. As you might be able to discern, this AU focuses on Sophie. I imagine this story to be one for a turn-based RPG, like the Persona series in particular, where Sophie has to delve into her 7 different mind palaces, themed after the deadly sins, as you can probably guess. She and her party members then each represent one of the 7 heavenly virtues, where characters are added to the party based on what sin needs to be tackled. For the cast, each of them has the problem where they have too much of their virtue to the point of being a vice. For example, Phoenix here is supposed to represent the virtue of patience, but often has so much patience that it's to the point where it's just straight up inaction. This concept, I believe, is based on Aristotle's theory of the mean, which is basically a concept that a virtue exists in the middle of 2 vices, in which one spectrum of the vice is having too much of the virtue, and the other spectrum of the vice is being deficient in the virtue. For this drawing, I wanted to represent Sophie, Balab, and Phoenix, who in many of these AUs used to be a trio of friends in their teens before having a messy falling out. I thought it'd be fun for their outfits to all be variations on angel-adjacent clothing, each adjusted to be a nod to the virtue they represent. Phoenix, as stated, is patience, so referencing time-related imagery such as hourglasses and a straight-up clock bow seemed appropriate. Sophie is kindness, so hearts are a pretty easy motif to include, plus a cleric-like silhouette and staff. Balab was the hard one with temperance. It's not a virtue with a lot of obvious symbols for the concept, so I ended up equating temperance with moderation and healthy balances, and boom. Gave her an asymmetrical fit showcasing an equal amount of black and white. And a shield and hairpiece referencing the classic judgment balancing scales. I also couldn't help but reference her item summoning thing too. That's something she does in Canon. These designs were going to be a lot more ornate, but I figured that most human-like angels don't wear anything too extravagant anyway. Not sure how I feel about the style I went for with the wings though. Maybe I should have opted for them to look like magically transparent-y, like attachments instead. But I think everything else design-wise functions pretty well. This is a very normal visual novel where is the lowest rank member of a cult and has to prepare a sacrifice, who just so happens to be in an attempt to pull themselves out of their lower station. However, during the multiple-day process to prepare the ritual, feels a prodding in the back of their mind to recognize the true nature of their sacrifice, and perhaps allow themselves to be truly seen in return. It's October, so it felt fitting to include my most horror-focused story. The character designs here are playing with 2 different motifs that end up working pretty well together, which is the scapegoat and the sacrificial lamb. The hooded figure is our scapegoat, the lowest ranked in this ghoulish cult. They wear a mask that completely obscures their face and open sleeves that show the, consequences of being the scapegoat. I imagine that other members of this cult wear masks that obscure less and less of the face depending on how high you rank, with the leaders having straight up no mask at all. On the other hand, we have the sacrificial lamb who has their face stuck in a bag to attempt to give the scapegoat less reservations about preparing them for the ritual. To better communicate the lamb theme, we also have some wool accents added onto what I'm just going to call ritual clothing. The composition of this one was actually the hardest to figure out. I wanted to draw a more tense scene while also showing off most of the designs. The end result has me twisting the perspective a bit, but it was the best thing I could come up with in a pinch. If you watched my video last year about Cringe-Tober, you might recognize this version of my characters. Heck, you may have found this channel because of this YouTube short. I'm partially drawing this prompt to convince myself that, oh yeah, I will definitely make an animatic for this one day. I do actually have a full idea for it planned out in my head. I just need to make the time. Anyway, this AU is simple since it's a short story, basically. Ash is an angel or angel-like being who was found by the leaders of this kingdom only to be betrayed by them, as they only value him as, basically, a rare commodity to be shown off. Balab's in this story too. You can actually spot her in the OG animatic I made, but no one's pointed it out yet. Just funny. Where she's a part of a team of magical assistants to the crown. I really can't say more than that because then I would spoil the rest of the story, which maybe one day will be real. So real, guys. The drawing for this one actually came together pretty well. I'm kind of shocked at how much I didn't struggle to figure out the poses here. Usually when drawing two characters interacting with this, especially when there's some overlap, it can be tricky, but I kind of got it. Nice. I don't know, this one just scratches an itch. The sketchy textures look especially yummy, the white silhouette thing for Ash worked pretty well, and they both look on model, which I can sometimes struggle with. I just look at this one and go, aww, cute, : 3. 'Cause it is. You thought I was done talking about Minecraft, were ya? You fool! I'm dragging you back into the topic again. So, this AU is what I've technically made content for, if making a Minecraft world counts as content. I have this forever world in Minecraft, which, if you don't know what that is, a forever world is basically a world in Minecraft you're committed to playing for super long term. Updates be darned. I found this specific seed from a channel called Minecraft and Chill that has a mushroom island surrounded by pretty much every other biome in the game. Based on the world map, I thought it'd be fun to come up with all of this lore that all my OCs are half human, half some Minecraft mob, who each have their own territory on the map. Balab is a half Enderman, because of course she is, who is stuck with the Mushroom Island and has to interact with the other regions to get access to their resources. Because Balab has little to offer in terms of trading resources, she instead has to offer up her time and energy to whatever project or help that person needs her to do, whether that be a building project or going on an exploration or killing something. All of the things. Although that's basically the setup, I do go to different regions in the world and imagine myself as though I am any of my 7 characters, which makes playing the game more immersive for me. It's pretty fun. I'd recommend adding lore to your Minecraft worlds. It spices things up a bit. It gives you a lot of inspiration. When it comes to the drawing itself, this is one of my least favorites, honestly. Ash as an ally is pretty cute. I like the blue coloring. He's fine, so I'm blaming Balab for this one. I think her design could have used a couple more passes during my sketching phase to make it really pop more. And even with the design I have, I don't think I posed her in a way that really complements the shape and style of her fit. It's a shame though, because in theory I am amused by her just like holding a big ol' piece of dirt like the Endermen do in game, but they can't all be winners. Okay, I'm actually cheating with this prompt because it's not in AU. I mean, it technically is, since I can't imagine this happening to my characters in Canon, but you know what I mean. There's no story for me to regale you with. This is instead an art event that a Discord I'm a part of came up with for the full season. I figured that the only way I would find the motivation to participate is if I roped it into a video like this. So here we are. The event was basically people drawing their OCs going to a Met Gala. It's like all of our OCs are attending together, it's cute. The gala theme is basically fantasy aesthetics combined with the macabre, which has led to some fun results over there. All of the artists on the Discord are very talented. When getting inspiration for this prompt, I remembered that I've always associated Ash with this particular Ophelia painting. It's one of my favorite paintings in general. I'm not sure if I can quite articulate to you why I draw this parallel between these two things, but I do. I thought it would be fun for his fit to be a nod to that painting by giving him plant and flower accessories and accents. For Baleb, I figured since Ash is already playing the role of Ophelia, we might as well go full circle and make her Hamlet. I swapped out Baleb's usual main color of purple for red, so that way the centerpiece on her chest reads more as an abstract interpretation of a bleeding wound. Hamlet was stabbed from a poisoned sword. Spoilers? So the gems, frills, and beading are supposed to invoke that. I think I'm pretty happy with the fits. I do wish I experimented more with the poses. I think an adjustment of posture or expression could have really sold the more macabre, darker aspect of the theme, but at least they're runway ready. And we're wrapping this up with a second and final group picture. This time we're going with an AU idea that I feel like many OC artists have had come across their mind at least once, which is the band AU. For this AU, I imagine the setup is that this friend group over the course of their 4 years of college met, became friends, bonded over a shared love of music, grew really close, and then slowly dissolved for a plethora of reasons. However, a Battle of the Bands type competition has started accepting auditions, which prompts the group to get back together and perhaps attempt to right the wrongs that split them apart in the first place. It was fun deciding who would get what instrument and giving them stage names. For some reason, I always imagined these guys having a Jewel theme to their band. Like, my idea for their band name is the Jewel Tones, for example. Some of these designs I like more than others. I think Phoenix's is my personal favorite, love the Star Puffs, but I also like how Baleb and Isis's fits came together as well. Each one has some detail I enjoyed adding, though. Over the course of this challenge, I've really solidified the visual language that I use consistently for all of these goobers, and this prompt, I think, is the best showcase of that. And that's a wrap on OC-Tober. I'm pretty happy with how most of these drawings turned out. These month-long art challenges provide a pretty good opportunity to grow. For me, I wanted to mainly focus on making designs that I was happy with, and also continue to get more comfortable sketching poses digitally. And I think I've made some progress on both fronts. You may remember in a previous video that digital sketching in particular was a struggle for me, but I think I've finally gotten the hang of it. I also feel like I'm getting a better grasp on the ways I can render characters in my sketchy style, which I will be looking forward to experimenting with on future projects. For now, though, I'm glad I can put the project to rest. Maybe one day I'll talk more at length about some of these AUs, because some of them have so much more lore that I had to neglect talking about for the sake of just giving y'all more digestible summaries. Or maybe I'll yap about some of the ones that were left on the cutting room floor entirely. Not sure. Either way, thank you so much for listening to me gab about my OCs and the AUs I made for them. I really care about my silly guys, so people taking the time to let me show them off means a lot. Subscribe if you want, and sleep well. Bye bye.